Hey there, everybody. If you joined us, this is a kind of like an off the cuff episode.
Mike and
This
Trev episode.
this all started in Mike's brain. So if you don't like it, blame him. If you do like it, I'll take some of the credit. Um, Mike, you want to take it away?
Yeah, so we're doing a thing that's a little bit different. We're doing a rewrite of Star Wars. And at least in our circles, the Star Wars movies are some of the greatest ever made. However, there's little things, especially in the original trilogy, little tweaks that I always thought should have been done in the movie that could make it that much better. Then once we get to the prequels and sequels, we got lots to say about that. But anyways, because our little geeking off the page group are such Star Wars fans, I thought it would be fun to just kind of do some story pitches and a little bit of script doctoring, rewriting. And if we had the chance to go back and fix things in the story, what are some of the things we would do? And of course, Gavin and Troy had nothing to say, so they didn't show up.
Well, I would hop in the DeLorean, rock it back to 75 when they started filming this, or 74, I think, when George Lucas officially started writing some of this down. A lot of it so I'm going to start with Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, first one that came out, released in 77. 1977 for the millennials out there who were like, 2077, what happened? So for the most part, I would leave Episode 4 untouched. The only time I'd really get myself involved, I would add a kind of like there's a something that's on YouTube called Scene 38 Reimagined, where it's the fight between Darth Vader and Obi-Wan. I would extend that out, not to the extent they did, because I don't think Alec Guinness could have, moved that well. But I would want Obi-Wan to verbally express his regret of not saving Vader from himself in their final duel before this one. Something to the effect of that they have fought before, and he really regrets not saving Anakin when he could have, and not calling Anakin, calling him Vader. Other than that, the only thing I would do with Episode 4 is kind of take out in George Lucas, in getting ready for the prequels, tinkered with his original 3, 4, 5, and 6. And I would take out some of that tinkering, because I believe 100% hand shot first. Greedo did not get a shot off, did not, hand didn't suddenly twitch his head to the side and the shot missed. Greedo never got his blaster out of the holster. Han gunned him down. The other thing would be the scene with Jabba. Originally, they filmed it with this big Irish guy, and then they went back and threw a CG job. Just cut that whole sequence out. It's not needed. Yeah. The only bit of tinkering I would leave from that Georgia put in was in the Death Star when Han Solo turns the corner and there's like 2 stormtroopers, and instead now there's it's like a whole guard room full of troopers. I'd leave that in, and I'd leave in a lot of the little bits of the dogfight sequences in the battle above the Death Star, because of the time they couldn't do it. They were still, in essence, forging practical effects at that time that worked. They just couldn't optically print some of that stuff. Like the flight of all the ships leaving the Yavin 4 headed toward the Death Star. In the original cut, it's like, wow, the rebels fielded at maybe a dozen ships. This is going to be a short fight. And now there's 30, 40, 50 starfighters. Like, all right, they're going to put up a real fight. That would be the only changes. How about you, Mike?
Pretty much the same kind of thing you're saying. So like we have our top 10 movies that we're doing, and spoilers, this one's way up there near the top. And the reason it is because it's such a good story, and there's not really anything I would change. I thought it was interesting what you said about that scene 38. Watching that video, and if anybody hasn't seen it, go onto YouTube and take a look, because it's really interesting. When I first started watching that, I was kind of excited to see Obi-Wan and Darth Vader actually do, a little bit more advanced fighting. But I think they took it a little bit to Rogue One, where there's something about old Jedis where I like how it's simple movements. It doesn't have to be like Yoda in the prequels doing flips and crazy stuff. It's very controlled. It's very subtle. It's not all that flashy.
Yeah, they're more in tune with the Force. They don't need to do like the big fancy twirls and flips because they know where the sword's coming in, and they just do a simple move to just get their sword to block it.
Yeah. But all that said, there are a couple of shots in that Scene 38 reimagined that are pretty cool. Like, it would be nice to see just a little bit extra sword fighting in there. As far as the special edition stuff, the one scene that I really liked that they added was the Millennium Falcon flying out of the docking port on Mos Eisley. That was one where you really get to see the Millennium Falcon. It's, a nice money shot. But everything else, like, I think the original was fine for what it was, especially when you think it was back in 1977, right? And this defined special effects for basically any sci-fi movie that came after this. So I'm okay with what was in there. It would have been nice if the lightsabers actually glowed so that you could see the light on everything. But again, this is like technology at the time, and I'm willing to let that go. But for the original Star Wars movie, yeah, there's not really anything I would change. I agree with what you're saying. Han shot first. It would be nice to see those extra X-Wings in the Battle of Yavin, but it's like the original holds up.
It does.
So
that's why I honestly, I had like 4 bullet points, but no story anything that I changed story-wise. Like, it hangs so well together. I didn't want to touch it.
Yeah. And that's one too, where even when I watched this one with my kids, I got my hands on a despecialized version of Star Wars. So when we watch it, it is without all the extra added special effects. And it's as true to the original theatrical cut as you can possibly get. So yeah,
I have Blu-ray of the special edition, and I have a DVD of the non-special edition. And of the two, probably the DVD one's been watched more.
Yeah.
I prefer the non-special edition. Moving on to 1980s Empire Strikes Back. Spoiler alert, this is in my top 10. This was a movie that really changed me. But going back and looking at it, now, if I had the chance to do a rewrite or change stuff up, I'll let you take the first one on this one, and I'll chime in after.
All right. So for me, again, this is my favorite movie of all time, and I wouldn't change a thing. Like, if I could keep the original theatrical cut as is, I'd be happy with that for the rest of my life. Some of the little tweaks that they ended up doing in the special edition, like making the snow speeders not transparent, I mean, that's kind of cool. It's neat seeing Bespin with the windows and the sunsets. I don't think it's necessary. If they were able to do that in the original making of the film, I think that would have been nice. But again, I'm happy with white hallways. That doesn't bother me. In the special edition with Vader going back to the Star Destroyer, that's a kind of nice shot that bridges the gap. But as a kid, I didn't care. Like, he was on Bespin, now he's at his Star Destroyer. I'm fine with that. So the only thing that I see as a little bit of a plot hole that maybe could have been explained or fixed somehow is the whole idea that Darth Vader is chasing the Millennium Falcon for the whole time Luke's training. Like, how many months is that? 2 months, 3 months, 5 months, half a year? Like, is Darth Vader just cruising through this meteor or asteroid thing?
Long time.
Trying to get, like, that's kind of crazy. But as a movie, it flows nicely. It's not until you stop and think, like, wait a second, like, how long has this been? So if there's something they could have done in there, that could have maybe filled that plot hole. However, I'm happy with the movie.
All right. So for me, I didn't think there needed to be a kiss between Luke and Leia. I mean, it did bring up a little bit of the rivalry between Luke and Han, but it didn't need to be there. I mean, they'd already cemented their friendship, one-upmanship, rivalry between blowing up the Death Star and Han saving Luke, and that's another Yomi Jr. That was fine enough. I agree. We needed a longer training, not really a training montage, but a sense of time in the training of Luke. Just because it looks like he does it in a weekend. you know, it's like he joins up with Yoda Thursday night, and by Sunday afternoon he's flying out to go to Bespin. You're like, wow, I guess Jedi training is not that hard. It's
This is like how they learn karate in the valley, right?
exactly, you know, some montage, some flips through the air, and pff, damn, you're a Jedi, son. Um, like it could have been as much. You could have done as much as when he first starts training. Luke's like clean shaven, and as time goes on, he starts to grow a beard. And by the time he realizes, you know, when he's doing that upside down and gets the vision and falls, he's got a full beard and uses, you know, whatever tool. And you know, before he gets into the X-wing, he shaves it all off. But it shows a passage of time. Like how long would it take him to grow a big beard and his hair to get all shaggy and whatnot? Something like that. Now, there's a line in the early part of Empire where um, Han says something like, you know, we ran into that bounty hunter on Ord Mantell.
Mm-hmm.
Show it, don't say it. Like take that line and between Luke's training where he's getting the beard, show the Millennium Falcon like they land on a place, they're trying to get repairs. There's an altercation with the bounty hunter who's after him. They, you know, throw the Millennium Falcons together as best they can. They roar off again. Cut to the bounty hunter scene in, like, you know, in the Star Destroyer where Vader's interviewing the bounty hunters because he realizes this is a resource he can use to track them down. And just something like when they reach Bespin, have Leia contact like Rebel High Command, and just to say, you know, we're dodging Vader, we're leading him on a merry little chase sort of thing, finding new coordinates for the new staging. Like, so show that there's been months have passed.
Mm-hmm.
Because right now, the way the movie goes is, yeah, it just feels like a weekend. Like, you know, Luke just shows up at Dagobah for, you know, an extended weekend and he's a Jedi. And that was I mean, I remember as a kid thinking, it doesn't take much to become a Jedi, does it? And that's something that's always rankled me. That just they just don't show they show a passage of time. They just don't give us a long passage. So that would honestly, the rest of the movie, keep it just as it is. I wouldn't change a thing.
Because that's the thing is when you're watching the movie, it flows nicely. Like, you know, it's like you're on that roller coaster, you're going through the ride. But it is when you realize that, you know, the Luke section and the Han and Leia section are happening at the same time.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to line up.
Yeah, it does, because they're being chased by the Empire. They float away with the garbage, and then they go to Bespin, and next thing you know, then Luke's at Bespin. And you're like, well, what? I mean, they could even have a whole thing where you see the Millennium Falcon like almost completely disassembled on the landing pad as they're completely rebuilding her. So you'd say, okay, this takes some time. This is not something you do in an afternoon.
Yeah.
So
I guess actually they could rationalize it too because they didn't have the hyperdrive. So they had to just fly regular. So they could have been flying for like 5 months.
Yeah. But again,
but you have to show it.
Show Han starting to grow a beard. 3PO complaining about the lack of regular maintenance because they don't have the materials on board, or small throwaway lines like that, or small little things like that to show a passage of time. So yeah. Then we get into Return of the Jedi. Yeah. This one suffers the same problem right from the get-go. I didn't realize until I read the novelization that Han Solo had been frozen in carbonite for over 5 years. Because it doesn't seem like that. It just seems like, bam.
I never would have guessed that.
Yeah, that, you know, they immediately figured out he was on Tatooine, that Jabba had him, and they just immediately went and mounted a rescue mission. Not that 5 years have passed, that like Luke returned to Yoda for further training, and they had to track down, you know, who had Han and where would he be and all that. There's nothing to there. Like in the novelization, they explain that more and it makes more sense. But in the movie, there's nothing to show a passage of time like that. So I'd want to see a better depiction of that passage of time, that Han's been there for a while. Not like, you know, people setting their drinks on the, you know, on him, but just something. Now there was a sequence of Luke went back to Dagobah basically to watch Yoda die, which is kind of morbid when you say it, but I wanted to see, because Yoda was like, you know, Luke is in essence the last trained Jedi because Leia had no training at the point. I wanted to see Yoda pass on like a Jedi holocron or some books or something to say, these will aid you in the rest of your journey when I can't help you. Something to that effect. No Ewoks. No fucking Ewoks. I would have rather have seen Wookiees that the Empire had enslaved for forced labor. They had them in, put them in camps on Endor, and they fly them up to the Death Star to make, do whatever, and then fly them back down to leave them on the Force. That would have been better. A bunch of slave labor Wookiees than Ewoks.
Which is what was the original script, right? Wasn't
Yeah,
that the
I think
original
so.
Star Wars script was on Yavin. I think there was supposed to be Wookiees or something like that, but they had to cut all that.
Yeah, so I think this would have been, because they, again, in the novelization, they explained the first Death Star was, a lot of it was built using Wookiees as slave labor, because they're very strong, so you don't need like machines to like lift stuff up and hold it in place while they weld it. So they would, in theory, they would do the same thing. And the last thing is the rebels needed to use an actual army on the surface of the moon. Like when the Armada arrives, have drop ships going down to the forest moon and dropping off soldiers. So it's not like 18 guys taking over, like defeating the Empire on the surface. Have a whole damn army. You've got an army. Not everyone can fly a ship. Put some people on the planet. I want kind of like the land battle in Rogue One at the end. That's what I wanted. I wanted to see, X-Wings in the surface fighting TIE fighters and shooting down like AT-ATs, as well as the big space armada battle. So that's where I would make my changes. How about you?
So this is a movie where I would have removed all of the special edition stuff. So none of that would be in here. I hated the Sarlacc with the beak. I hated the new size Snoodles. I hated the new song, all that kind of stuff. Like, I don't think that helped the movie at all. So we're going right back to the original theatrical for this. Nothing else. One fun thing about the special edition version is I watched this in Germany, in Munich, for my honeymoon.
Mm-hmm.
So it was bad enough watching the special edition version of this, but it was even more funny watching it in German, because I knew everything that was being said, but I don't understand a thing of German. So it was quite an experience. But anyways, for the changes, Boba Fett, he would not be killed by accident. That's one thing that even as a little kid drove me crazy. And this is where we're starting to get into that sort of Phantom Menace kind of kids mentality for the story, like Anakin blowing up all the ships. Whoops, what does this do? Oops. It's like, no, this is the most badass bounty hunter in the galaxy. It should have been a struggle to kill him. So it's like, oh, that should have been a deliberate strike by Han Solo. That would be a lot more rewarding. If
I kind of would have hoped that Han swung at him, he jumped back with, kick on the jetpack, fires. Even as much as Luke throwing the lightsaber, deflecting the blast and catching those, and the blast hits the jetpack, and that's what slams him into it. Something that's very Jedi related.
Yeah.
But not like, oh, I just turned Boba Fett, where? Hits him, and then that horrible scream.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, that's,
So, yeah, Boba Fett's way too cool to be killed accidentally like that. As far as Ewoks go, I'm okay with the Ewoks. But the whole thing was done way too kid-like. And I heard a quote that apparently Lucas had been explaining to the effects guys, like, this is basically Benji in space. And all the guys were like, what? So again, this is when he's trying to sell more toys, I think. And
the only thing that makes the Ewoks palatable is the fact that that if 3PO hadn't stopped them, they were going to eat Han and Luke.
Yeah.
Which means all those stormtrooper helmets, they ate the people inside them.
Yeah.
And what were they serving at the end in that big celebration?
Have you ever played the Battlefront, the Ewok level in that? That's a fun level where it's nighttime and the Ewoks are coming to hunt you.
Yeah,
it's hilarious. So they could have kept that. No, I'm okay with the Ewoks being there, but they can't be goofy teddy bears. They got to be a little bit more menacing,
more savage.
Yeah,
that's why I'm thinking Wookiees would have been so much better. Wookiees coming down, ripping, like twisting heads around, ripping limbs off stormtroopers, beating them with it. I would have been okay with that. Even 10-year-old me would have been cheering in the seats.
I'm not against Wookiees. I'd be happy with that as well. Okay, now here's the big change, and this is my butterfly effect change that would affect every single movie that comes after this. Is Leia is not Luke's sister. I think that Luke does have a twin sister, but we haven't seen her. She's on some other planet. She's hidden away, but it's not Princess Leia. And that retroactively makes the kiss on Hoth palatable. Like, it's okay. And it's not just another family relation that comes out of nowhere. When Luke finds out that Vader's his father, that's one of the most powerful moments in cinematic history as far as I'm concerned. But the moment we find out Leia's his sister, it's just like, oh, that did nothing for me, even as a kid. In fact, it cringed me out. It's like, you had the hots for 2 movies. Like, what the hell?
That's why I was like, oh God. That's what I'm sitting there like, Leia's my sister. I was like, you kissed her.
Yeah. So in my version, no, Princess Leia is not the sister. No, she is from Alderaan. She's a princess from Alderaan. And that's it. So she can end up marrying Han. They can have their twins. Luke can still train them. They can become Jedis. The whole deal. But yeah, in my version, they're not related.
Now, I will say, I had actually named each trilogy. So episodes 4, 5, and 6 are the Skywalker trilogy. And this comes into play as 1, 2, and 3, and 7, 8, 9 show up.
Okay.
So
one last change I would do on this, and this is the very ending. So at the end of Return of the Jedi, it's the big Ewok party, and you have like the family photo shot of all the heroes, and then it cuts to music.
Mm-hmm.
I think we needed a shot of Luke Skywalker leaving the party and walking away into the sunset or the moonrise or something. So he becomes the wandering samurai, like he's the Jedi at that point. So, all the rebellion's partying, and he's kind of not part of that world anymore. He's going to be the traveling Ronin, going through the galaxy and just fixing whatever needs to be fixed. So that would be my final shot.
That's actually, I think that works perfectly. Or even just like his X-wing taking off. It's like the samurai riding his horse away or walking away into the sunset. Yeah,
that would make it a little bit bittersweet. One thing I'd always heard as a kid is Harrison Ford was campaigning to have Han Solo die.
Yeah,
Return of the Jedi.
He's even said that in a couple of interviews. He felt that Solo was supposed to die at the end of Empire to make because Empire ends on a tragedy.
Yeah,
and to make that knife twist that much more, have Solo die.
Yeah,
but he was too popular of a character, and George refused.
Yeah, so if the trilogy was to end there, I would have had Han Solo die on Endor. But if we were going to be making a sequel trilogy, then I would keep him around because it's just too much fun to see him and Leia's kids.
Yeah. All right. Shall we go back in time to 1, 2, and 3?
We're going back in time.
All right. There's a lot of pages for me, by the way. Now, my methodology for doing my rewrites for 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9 is I tried to keep a lot of the new characters, use them in different ways, locations. So I tried to keep a lot of things not really the same, but used elements that they introduced because some of them were, perfectly valid. And I'm like, why not use them? Like, why reinvent the wheel and come up with a whole new character when there's already a whole new character that can fit that role anyway? So that was my thought process. I was trying to make changes overall to the story, but not so much that I had to completely rewrite like all new characters, all new dialogue, because sometimes that just gets exhausting. And I'm not getting paid for this. So no, so interestingly enough, episode 1, 2, and 3, my trilogy name is the Obi-Wan trilogy. So I shifted focus from Anakin Skywalker into Vader into we follow Obi-Wan and the events that happen around him. So, and then it'll make sense when 789 comes up. So If you want, I can start on this one, and then you can present yours.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So I said it pretty much opens the same way. The ship that's docking, and the droid donut with the little munchkin in the middle. The Timbit. And what it is this is actually the Republic senator for Naboo, who's on board. He's meeting with the Trade Federation, or she. So what's going on is the reason why the Trade Federation there is the Gungan, the aquatic species of Naboo, are buying battle droids and war material because they're fighting the surface dwellers in Naboo for the control of the planet. So I'm thinking very much like the Mon Calamari Quarren conflict. You had two intelligent species on a planet, and each are fighting for dominance. So the Jedi are there almost as bodyguards in addition to the senator. They move ahead to kind of like check out the room, make sure everything's in the up and up. Ship gets destroyed, killing the senator. This is forces the Jedi, who are Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon Jinn, to flee to the surface. They make contact with the premier of the planet, Palpatine. So he's the elected leader, but not the hereditary leader. So not the dynasty leader. So he tells them they have to get to Coruscant to please their case to Public Senate and the Jedi Council, as the Trade Federation is landing a massive army. And then he says, you have to take the Royal Queen with you because her life's in danger. If she dies, it's going to take out the fighting will of the whole planet. So there we get Queen Amidala. As the ship, so a lot of these scenes kind of hold up. So as the ship, the big silvery ship flies off, it gets damaged. They have to divert to a nearby system that they could get the hyperdrive repaired. Happens to be Tatooine. So while they're trying to secure a replacement, they meet up with a young slave named Anakin Skywalker, who impresses Qui-Gon with his boy's force potential. And he also helps them getting their components. We stay with Obi-Wan as the central character. So all the interaction between Qui-Gon and Anakin is kind of like off to the side. At this point, Sith apprentice Darth Maul has been sent to Tatooine to kill the Queen and the Jedi, but mainly his target is the Queen. So during the ensuing scuffle, by the way, there's no pod race. No fucking pod race.
It's funny, that was one of my favorite parts of the movie.
I liked it too, but
I didn't like the movie.
It was unnecessary. So during the scuffle, Anakin is forced to flee with the Jedi, because he can't get back to Mos Espa, because this happens where the ship is, and they're like, the Sith apprentice will kill you if you stay here, even if we leave. So get on board. Qui-Gon offers to teach him about the Force. So the Jedi Council tests the boy, and just like in the film, they refuse to accept him, stating he's too old and he's in such a fragile emotional state that no, we're not training him. Queen Amidala pleads her case to the Republic Senate, but the Trade Federation, they managed to derail her efforts. She tells the Jedi she's returning to Naboo to fight with their people, whatever the outcome. So Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and his new semi-Padawan Anakin return with her. At this point, the Trade Federation betrays the Gungans because they want Naboo because of the rich resources. So they land their forces and they're killing everyone indiscriminately. And just like in the film, Darth Maul fights the Jedi. He kills Qui-Gon, but Obi-Wan cuts him in two. Qui-Gon asks Obi-Wan to train Anakin in defiance of the Jedi Council's wishes. Premier Palpatine is elected to represent Naboo as the new Republic senator. So that moves him now to Coruscant. And this is basically how the movie ends. There's no big have your glowing sphere Gungans sort of bullshit. But with most of the film centering more on on Obi-Wan instead of Anakin, it's more of Obi-Wan's story. So there's that whole scene where, when the Jedi Council says, no, we're not going to train the boy, and Qui-Gon says, well, I'll train the boy. And like, well, you've already got a Padawan. And he's like, well, I feel that Obi-Wan's ready to take the trials, and I wish to have him named as, I wish to have him elevated to the status of Jedi Knight. And, you could have that. So we're still sticking with Obi-Wan for this whole movie. That would be the big change. So a lot of it stays the same, but it's just a shift in focal of the camera. We get rid of a lot of as I said, the pod race doesn't need to happen. We don't need to hear Anakin go yippee. We don't need to hear him referred to as Annie.
Definitely not.
Stuff like that. So that's how I would change the first episode. How about you?
For me, we're looking at a complete rewrite at this point. Um, so a few things. The movie should have started with R2D2 and C3PO. One thing I liked about the original trilogy is it's this big space opera, essentially told through the viewpoint of these two robots. And I would like that narrative thread to continue through all of the movies. So the very first shot of the movie should have had R2D2 and C3PO, and they're just cruising around doing whatever it is they're doing. So the narrative thread would still be told through those droids. C3PO would not be Luke's brother. I think that's one of the most horrible things, making Anakin build C3PO. I don't know what the hell George was thinking with that one. Like, if you thought Leia being a sister was a bad idea, C3PO being the brother is even worse.
I had
So,
3PO as Queen Amidala's translator. So
Yeah.
she's with Amidala he's with Amidala right from the get-go.
And that would make sense. So if the two of them, if R2D2 and C3PO were with her, and so they're watching as like the clone army comes to take over, whatever it is, but it should be their narrative, and they're the people that are basically telling the story, essentially. Like, that's the narrative thread that you're following. I think the Clone Wars should have been full-blown action at this point. So it's not, it starts later, and it's like, no, just like in the first movie, Star Wars, it's already in the middle of war. Like, the rebellion's already started, the Empire's already hunting them down. No, like, things are already in motion. This should have started in the middle of a conflict of some sort. I do like the idea of the Trade Federation. I do like the idea that Naboo's, like, the trade embargoes and all, like, that's very realistic. That's one of the ideas I really liked from the Phantom Menace. But it should have been more of the war stuff going on. I think the Jedi should have been more like, again, like traveling samurai. Like, it should have had that sort of Japanese cultural feel. Like, they're the animated series that came out recently, a lot of those stories had that vibe where the Jedis are just kind of wandering. It's like, there's conflict, they show up,
wandering judges, like street judges from Judge Dredd. They're there, they see what's going on, they provide a conflict resolution, they enforce it if necessary.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like with mine. If I have the gun and the Naboo are openly fighting, they're there with the senator to try to, like, get the Trade Federation to stop supplying robots. At the same time, the Jedi there to come to mediate between the two races.
Yeah. So there's a lot that could have been done there. Nothing would have happened on Tatooine in my version of the story. That's one thing that I didn't like. Like, I mean, it's very nostalgic to go back to Tatooine, right? Because that's where the whole story started. But there's something intellectually dishonest with Luke being hidden on the planet that his whole family's from.
Under the same last name. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that was something I remember thinking way back when we first saw it. I was like, if Tatooine's like the hub of nowhere, there's a lot of shit that seems to keep happening to Tatooine.
Exactly. That's one thing I kind of liked about, one of the only things I liked about the Force Awakens, is that you got a desert planet, but it's a different desert planet.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't have to be Tatooine. Yeah. So, you can still have a desert, but just make it somewhere else. Although it would have been nice if it was, again, if you're trying to keep that samurai vibe, it would have been cool if it was more of a Japan feel, or like whatever planet you're on. I guess Naboo could be like that. No, but make it seem very distinct from anything we've seen before. The Roger robots would be gone.
Oh God, yes. They're robots. They don't need to have a personality.
And I was saying they should be like IG-88 models. That would be a lot more menacing if the robot army was, IG-88s.
I did like the design of the battle robots, and especially the advanced ones with I did like the differences in design, because IG-88 is basically an assassin droid.
Yeah,
it was designed and purpose built to be an assassin. So I liked the tank design. I think the designs were fun. I just think adding that stupid Roger personality was just like, oh Christ, really?
Yeah, I think they had to be more menacing, and because then you'd actually have an interesting clone war with like the
Mhm.
clone army versus the robot army. It could have been really intense, and then you just throw some Jedi's in there. Um, Jar Jar,
He was gone. I,
it's
I didn't
like
even add him at all.
I I remember when the first trailer came out, it's like, oh, that's kind of an interesting, weird alien. It's something different than your Chewbacca, but it didn't work. He just became a goofy cartoon character that didn't really serve a story purpose and just was a slapstick through the whole movie.
Why I
And
axed him.
Star Wars doesn't need slapstick. Like
No.
it's no, it can have humor, but that kind of cartoon slapstick comedy is just doesn't work. And so as far as story goes, I think Anakin should have been again found somewhere other than Tatooine. Maybe he was a slave on a pirate ship. Maybe he was in some sort of slave colony. Whatever it is, it should have been something far away. I'd be fine if you don't know who his parents are. I don't like the idea of the immaculate conception with the Force. I think that's silly.
Again, I didn't even have that.
Yeah.
I didn't even
So
mention midichlorians. It was just
yeah,
Qui-Gon sensing that this boy has a lot of Force potential.
that's a huge one. The midi-chlorians, get that out of there. That's something that sort of spiritualism, the magic mixed with the sci-fi makes you think that, especially as a little kid, makes you think anybody can be a Jedi Knight.
Yeah, we don't need to quantify how the Force works.
Yeah.
Leave it mystical.
Yeah. So I like Darth Maul. I think that's cool. I like Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan together. I agree with you. It should have been essentially Obi-Wan's story through the whole thing, and Anakin is like a tag-along character. And I think at the end of this movie, Anakin should have been tempted by the dark side. At the end of this movie, you should see, oh crap, something's going to go seriously wrong. Because for the next movie, that's where I'd have the volcano sequence and the birth of Darth Vader.
Okay.
But
I waited until I'll get to it, but yeah, I try and keep a lot of the film intact as it is. That was my goal, but yeah, making, as I said, so for me, no pod race, no Jar Jar, no midichlorians. It could, I like the idea of finding Anakin. I mean, they could have even stopped on like a not even a planet, like a trader station.
Yeah.
And he happens to be a slave, and they're like, as part of when Maul shows up and starts, wreaking havoc, they're like, get on the ship because this place is about to go up because of all the damage, and that's how Anakin joins the crew.
Yeah, something random like that. And
yeah, but keep him in the background.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah,
Like,
at least until the end.
Yeah, he doesn't have to be the story of Annie.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we're pretty much on the same page with episode 1 of just what we're getting rid of. Just a lot.
Yeah.
Episode 2, again, I kept a lot of it the same with shifts. So there are things like Obi-Wan's been training Anakin as best he can with the limited support from the Jedi Council, which still doesn't approve of Anakin. I wanted to see Count Dooku publicly addressing the council, breaking ties with the Jedi, stating that their short-sightedness and arrogance are going to be their downfall. Even have a scene with in the council, he's sitting there and he stands up, walks to the center of the room, turns and addresses them, and kind of like turns in, gives in his verbal resignation as a Jedi and leaves the room. Something to make that like, oh shit, maybe the Jedi aren't all like, kumbaya and copacetic. I would have Amidala officially stepping down as the Queen of Naboo, becoming the planet's public senator, because Palpatine had just been elected as Chancellor of the Republic. So that could, and with the aging up of Anakin, you could show this passage of time that, obviously Palpatine's been doing a good job as the senator for Naboo, that they've elected him Chancellor. So he has to.
Well, that's actually one thing. I'm going to jump in here real quick.
Go
that's
ahead.
A good point you just made. The whole aging up thing. Padme and Anakin should have been the same age. I don't like the fact that she's like 5 years older.
Yeah,
it's kind of weird and creepy.
I'd had a note in there for mine. It was as Queen Padme was 16, the slave Anakin was like 14. So like when they say he's too old, it's not like, oh, it's a 9-year-old kid. It's easy enough to get the no, he's a 14-year-old at this point. Like he's a teenager, and they're like, no, way too old. Like this is the age that he should be halfway through his Padawan training, not his youngling training. So
Right.
that's so when they say no, he's too old, it kind of makes sense. That's why, and then in Empire, when Yoda's like, oh, too old, he is too old, kind of makes sense that they want them really young to indoctrinate them early.
Yeah.
So let's see. Public assassination attempt on Amidala's life leads Obi-Wan to investigate bounty hunter Jango Fett, kind of like in the movie. Leads him to Camino, which is creating a clone army under the orders of a fictitious Jedi named Tyran apostrophe US, which is actually Count Dooku. That's his Sith name is Darth Tyrannus, but he's basically masquerading as the Jedi Tyrannus. Trailing Fett, Obi-Wan discovers the meeting of the Separatists on the planet Geonosis, led by Dooku, supported by the Trade Federation, who's supplying the droid army for a more massive one that they used on Naboo. They were going to supplement it with the clone army. With the threat of war looming, Chancellor Palpatine is granted emergency powers, utilize the clone army. Jar Jar had no part in this. Captured on Geonosis, Obi-Wan's rescued by his pupil Anakin. No Amidala with him. Both are quickly recaptured by Jango and Dooku. Jedi Council and the clone army arrive, providing the spark. This is what starts the Clone Wars. The Jedi started the Clone Wars because they brought the clones with them. If just the Jedi had shown up on their own, everything was fine, but they brought the bulk of the clone army with them. This is what sparked the war between the Republic and the Separatists. The Jedi started it. This is one of the key points. These are supposed to be the peaceful guardians of the galaxy, and they started the war. They provided the spark.
I actually really like that idea. In my version, that would have already started at the beginning of episode 1. But yeah, I do really like that idea.
Because I think having Dooku breaking ties with the Jedi is kind of showing that the Jedi aren't the benevolent peacekeepers that everyone thinks they are. They've 25,000 plus years corruption has settled into the Jedi in some way or another. Their arrogance, they are the final word of law in the galaxy. Arrogance will become of that eventually at some point. So
that's kind of a cool idea, because you can see that kind of stuff happen in religion as well, where it starts off as a very pure
and noble thing, but
once it gets institutionalized and people use it for their own advantage, and the people that are followers of that religion, start using it for their own benefit rather than the true intent. Exactly. And that works with Star Wars, like the original story, because they keep saying ancient religions. And
so that was my thought process. Cool. Was the Jedi started the war because in their arrogance, how dare the Separatists do this? How dare they endanger the peace that the Jedi have fostered?
And that would be fun too, because then you can have the certain Jedis, like the Yodas, who are completely against it and are holding true to the true intent of what a Jedi is supposed to be, and you can see it start crumbling.
Mm-hmm. And so Dooku fights Obi-Wan and Anakin, defeats them both. Yoda does not show up. He escapes with plans what is to be eventually become the Death Star. Upon returning to Coruscant, Anakin finally reveals his feelings for Amidala, who returns his affection. That's when the two finally get together. When she thought he was dead on Geonosis, he returns, and he finally, he could even say something like, the Jedi won't let us be together, but I don't care. There we go. And that was my episode 2. How about you?
All right. So for myself, again, butterfly effect starts spiraling things out of control a little bit. I would have Anakin and what's her name? Amidala. Mm-hmm. They would be together at the end of the first movie, so that in the beginning of this one, they're already an item. She could already be Lady Skywalker at this point. Because in this one, it would essentially be the fall of Anakin Skywalker and the birth of Darth Vader. So that would be the story arc for this entire movie. When you were talking about Dooku, that's one thing I started thinking. He really should have been in the first movie, because if you're going to kill Darth Maul, That's one thing the original or the prequel trilogy has a problem with, is because you don't have the big bad like Darth Vader throughout the entire thing, right? It's like you get Darth Maul dead, you get Goku dead, and then you get Grievous, and it's like, what the hell is he? He's like, I've not
I didn't
connected
even
him
have
at all.
Grievous in my rewrite.
Exactly.
I didn't
So
even bother to add him.
I think we should have had a core group of Sith in the first movie. That way you can start killing them off, but you still have more Sith coming after the Jedi.
Well,
I would
in episode 1, when Darth Maul is sent to Tatooine or wherever to go kill the Queen, you could have the Emperor relaying to Dooku, "Send your apprentice to kill Queen Amidala," and Dooku turning to Maul and saying, "This is your target."
Yeah.
And he could even say something like, "Well, what if there's any Jedi?" And he's like, "Eliminate them."
Yeah, because then it feels more scary that there's this like evil satanic group of
This little hierarchy of evil that's going on behind the scenes.
And one thing they wrote into the movie is that there can only be two. Stupid idea. No, have an army of Sith, and maybe they do kill each other off.
Later on, this comes into effect.
All right. So that would be a big thing. I do like the whole stuff on Geonosis. That's cool to see a Star Wars water planet. I like the cloning facilities.
That's Kamino. Kamino's a water planet.
Oh,
Geonosis is the insect planet.
Oh, that's right. Okay, get rid of Geonosis. Kamino. I like that one.
I kept both because I figure Kamino's for the cloners. Geonosis is where the droid army is being made. So this is all the manufacturing and all that stuff. So I wanted to keep those two separate, kind of like what they did in the movie.
Okay.
But I wasn't going to have like the big battle arena with the 3 different monsters are attacking. It's like, why?
Okay, so for me,
shoot them with a blaster.
Yeah, I would cut the Geonosis completely out. Then it would be the Kamino is the one. So, and will tie in just for contrast, because you start on the water planet and then you end on Mustafar, where Obi-Wan battles Anakin and you get the birth of Darth Vader. So that would be like the overarching story that I would be doing in this one. And the whole thing. So it would be that triangle, sort of like the Han, Luke, Leia triangle. So you would have Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Padme triangle. You can have the conflict, and then Palpatine is corrupting Anakin. And then I would keep it like the idea with the Kyber crystals or whatever it is, whatever his reason to go to Mustafar to become like the full-on Sith. And then remember that script? I forget what it was called. That we were passing that around photocopies back in Sheridan.
Oh yeah.
So that was the first scene in that script, but I would make that the ending of this movie, which is the battle on the volcano planet. Anakin gets hacked up. And then the last shot would be the Sith coming. So there's dark robes pulling the charred body out of the lava and then performing the ritual to create Darth Vader. And the reason is because I want one full movie of Darth Vader just kicking butt.
So my episode 3, a lot of it is kind of the same, but again, shifting more to be more following Obi-Wan than Anakin. So, we have at this point, the Clone Wars is, going full force. Above Coruscant, you have like the two fleets are hitting each other. Kenobi and Skywalker are trying to rescue Palpatine, who's been kidnapped. Again, it's not Grievous. It's just he's been kidnapped by the Separatists. Obi-Wan and Anakin fight Sith Lord Dooku, who knocks out Obi-Wan, but is defeated by Anakin. Palpatine, basically urges Anakin to decapitate him. Anakin reunites with Padme. She says she's pregnant. He's excited, but then he starts having visions that she's dying or will be killed. Obi-Wan basically says, you're not supposed to be romantically linked to anyone. That's like against the Jedi code, but the future's not set. She's not dead. Settle down. We've got bigger things to do. At this point, this is where things change. So the Jedi Council, they want to appoint Obi-Wan as Palpatine's bodyguard and as a personal representative of the Jedi Council. Palpatine is suspicious of their motives, and he asks for Anakin instead, stating that General Kenobi would be wasted away from the front lines. So put him back on the front lines where he's doing a lot. He'll just take Anakin, who's not even a Jedi at that point, because the council approves, but they refuse to grant Anakin the rank of Jedi. He's not a general. He's basically a Padawan. This pisses off Anakin and makes him distrust. Kind of diminishes his faith in the Jedi. Obi-Wan travels off to fight some key battles in the Republic. Yoda goes to the Wookiee homeworld to fight off an invasion. This is where Palpatine starts to, seduce Anakin with knowledge of the Force, including the dark side. Anakin's like, wait a second, how does this guy know so much about the Force? How much does he know so much about the dark side? He must be a Sith Lord. He reports to Mace Windu, who confronts and attempts to subdue him. But at this point, kind of like the same sequence plays out the same way. But Palpatine kind of yells to Anakin when he's down that, I can save Padme. And that's when Anakin turns on Windu, cuts off his hand. He gets Force lightning out the window. Anakin pledges himself to Palpatine and the Sith, gets renamed as Darth Vader, orders issue 66. All that fun stuff happens. All the Jedi get killed off by the clone troopers. Let's see. Kills all the Jedi and trainees at the Jedi Temple. Vader then travels to Mustafar to take out the Separatist leaders because they've served their purpose. Palpatine declares himself Emperor, dissolves the Republic, and forms it into a galactic empire, denounces all the Jedi as traitors. Yoda and Obi-Wan, having survived Order 66, return to Coruscant. They learn of Anakin's turn to the dark side. Yoda says he's going to face down Palpatine. Obi-Wan needs to face down Vader. He seeks out Padme, find out his whereabouts. Obi-Wan travels to Mustafar. Padme stows away on the ship. So she's pregnant at this point, like heavily pregnant at this point, but she's the one stowing away on the ship. As Obi-Wan's walking down the gangplank, Vader sees him, Force crushes the ship, all but killing Padme. He didn't realize she was on board. Now he's, super enraged. Obi-Wan and him fight. Duel ends the same way with, both legs and an arm missing. Obi-Wan picks up Vader's lightsaber, leaves him for dead, leaves. Coruscant, Yoda, who's not flipping around like a frog on steroids, fighting Palpatine. Yoda gets injured, realizes that he can't beat Palpatine. It's not his course in life to defeat Palpatine. He realizes he needs to get out of there. So he flees with Bail Organa. They regroup with Obi-Wan and a gravely injured Padme. She gives birth to the twins and dies from her injuries. They can't, it's not like she doesn't die of sadness. She dies because of the injuries that she suffered at Vader's hand when the ship was basically crushed around her. Palpatine sends his Sith to retrieve Vader. They bring him to Coruscant, turn him into Vader, as we know and love him. Obi-Wan and Yoda conceal the twins from the Sith, go into exile until the time is right to challenge the Empire. There's the funeral. Palpatine and Vader supervise the initial construction of the Death Star, and pretty much everything plays out the same way. So at this point, a lot of it's the same, but there's some minor differences. But for the most part, we're following Obi-Wan. That's why this is his trilogy. It's the Obi-Wan trilogy. That's how I would do episode 3.
All right, for myself, the beginning of the movie would have Padme giving birth. So with the last one, you see Anakin die, and you see the rise of Darth Vader. In this one, like, Vader didn't know she was pregnant, and so she gives birth to twins. So Luke Skywalker and his sister, which isn't Leia. And the beginning of this would be the full out rise of the Empire. So this is Palpatine's in full power. They're taking over the Parliament. They're basically sending in their stormtroopers and taking, or I guess they'd be clone troopers, but they're taking over everything. And this is when Darth Vader and Boba Fett start hunting down Jedi. And that's something that was in that script that was passed around back at Sheridan, which I really loved, is that, Boba Fett, who was a Mandalorian, he's not a clone. I wouldn't have Jango Fett in this at all. He'd be full-blown Mandalorian, and he's helping Darth Vader basically murder any Jedis that they can find. So this whole movie would be basically anybody who's the good guys just running for their lives, like just trying to, it's like you're trying to escape Nazi Germany as Hitler's taking over and ready to wage war on the entire continent. Like, that's the overall vibe I'd have for this entire story. And I don't know what I would do as far as Padme dying. So at some point, so they're trying to run through the blockades. Like, the whole thing is just a big chase, anything to get away from the Empire. At some point, Obi-Wan realizes, like, we have to hide these children because they're the only hope. So the one kid would go off somewhere. I don't know where. It could be anywhere, because since it's not Leia, she could end up on any planet. Maybe it would be Bail Organa would be the one to deliver her to wherever she ends up being, just to kind of tie everything together. But Obi-Wan would end up dropping off Luke to his brother Owen Lars on Tatooine. Again, that's something that was in that original script that I really loved. It's Owen is Obi-Wan's brother.
Mm-hmm.
And so when he's talking about the crazy old wizard that lives in the cave, yeah, he's talking about his own brother that's out there, like his crazy brother who decided to join this religious cult and become a Jedi. So that would be the ending of the story. So yeah, completely different vibe. One thing I would like to see in it is I would like to see an Emperor versus Yoda, but I would have it nothing like what we saw in the movie. Like, I don't even think Yoda should be on Coruscant. Like, he should be somewhere else, some other planet, some forest, something, away from all the technology. Because I always liked him in Dagobah, because he is like the little gnome to the side of the road that gives you all the wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
I think he should still be that kind of a character in this. So he should be a kind of weird hermit. He's still a Jedi Master, but he's not with the rest of the Jedi kind of police force. He's something else. He's still, like a mad hermit, but he is the greatest Jedi out of all of them, or Jedi Master. But if he's trying to protect other Jedi as everybody's getting massacred, that could be a way for Palpatine and him to have like a wizard battle. Like, I would like to see the Force lightning and the blocking, and like you're saying, no flips. You don't need to be pulling out lightsabers. It's just a ultimate wizard battle between good and evil.
Exactly.
And then Yoda realizes, it's like, this isn't my fight, and he disappears somehow, escapes, because he knows the way to win is through Luke Skywalker.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why he goes into hiding.
So I'm just going to say right here, we are an hour in. I'm more than willing to keep going.
If you want to keep going, we can keep going. I didn't really write notes on the last ones, but
I did.
Okay,
I have pages.
I am going to be, because okay,
you can and I will say you can interject at any point. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, this is more like a free flowing exchange of ideas at this point, and I'm more than happy to do that. So I started episode 7. So again, this was a complete rewrite, because I really don't like episode 7, 8, or 9. Yeah. I just don't. So this is episode 7, takes place 20 years after the destruction of the second Death Star. The Empire's been defeated. Remnants are stationed above an unknown planet. Most of the Death Stars are patched together or look to be in ill repair. On the surface, General Hux, again reusing characters, is giving a rousing speech to the assembled First Order army, and all look to the sky as a new ship-based super weapon hyperspaces into place above the planet. Not a Death Star, not the Star Killer base, but just some enormous, like, giant freaking ship, like Super Star Destroyer size. But the core of that whole ship is a Death Star laser. This is their super weapon, and they're actually going to protect the damn thing. So, with the creation of the New Republic and reestablishment of the Jedi Order, the twins of Leia and Han Solo are poised to graduate from the Jedi Academy on Yavin 4, run by their uncle Luke Skywalker. Pulled right out of the books, Jason and Jaina Solo start their first mission as Jedi Knights to investigate the appearance of celebrated Republic hero Lando Calrissian, who has been monitoring the First Order. The twins, being the famous offspring of offspring of famous rebel heroes, are a bit arrogant and conceited, even with their training. Immediately decide to split apart and run their own operations because they no longer have Luke looking over their shoulder. So I want these kids to have a bit of a chip on their shoulder. My dad's Han Solo, my mom's Leia Skywalker Solo. You can't boss us around. So Jaina uncovers evidence of other Force users working for the First Order, comes in direct conflict with a Sith assassin. She decides to tackle the problem herself. She manages to defeat the assassin with the help of Finn, a defecting stormtrooper of the First Order, again, using a character. Only discover the Sith was the tip of the spear aimed at the heart of the New Republic. Her call to arms are ignored by the Republic forces because, in all, she's not, she's a nobody to them. Until the First Order Armada attacks and seizes control of the space surrounding Coruscant. At the same time, Jason runs afoul of bounty hunters Bosk and Dengar. Yes, bring them back. They were hired by the First Order to capture the young Jedi. Jason fights bravely, but is eventually overcome by the bounty hunting duo and is taken to Kamino, where he meets with Supreme Leader Snoke and is used as the template for a new batch of clones. So, war between New Republic and First Order, it fills the skies above Coruscant, initially forcing back the invaders. The New Republic is thrown in disarray when the First Order Armada pulls back to reveal their new super weapon, a ship carrying a Death Star laser. Despite their valiant attempts, the New Republic is unable to stop the New Order from destroying Coruscant completely. They blast the planet to shit. This kills off most of the New Republic Senate, including Leia Solo and C-3PO. They're gone. Dead.
You're killing R2-D2 and C-3PO?
Nope, just C-3PO. 3PO dies with Leia. Reeling, the New Republic is forced to regroup and launch guerrilla strikes in New Order. Jaina leads a group to Yavin 4, trying to enlist the aid of Luke Skywalker, but he seems unwilling to leave the Jedi Temple or let any of his new students enlist before finishing their training, as the Force is telling him there's a greater threat. Jaina basically kind of says, screw you to your uncle, to her uncle, grabs a bunch of Padawans willing to follow her, a New Republic Special Forces unit. They go to Dantooine, where a suspected First Order headquarter information nexus is located. This is going to tell them where the First Order is fully located. They are ambushed by Sith assassins and Dark Jedi. Jaina, Finn, and her forces are pushed back before the arrival of Luke Skywalker. The coordinated fighting turns the tables on the First Order until an unknown Sith battles Luke Skywalker in single combat and kills him. Removing his hood, Jason Solo, now named Darth Caedus, just casually destroys R2-D2 and orders his forces to attack. Jaina and Finn...
Killing the droids? This is madness.
Jaina and Finn flee from her twin, unable to counter his vastly increased power. That ends the 7th movie. This is why this trilogy is the Solo trilogy.
All right. Okay, so for mine, I think the overall storyline would be pretty much based on Dark Empire, like the comic books. So the trilogy for me would be setting up basically it's like the rise of the Empire. So first order, but I'd be basing this a lot more again on like what would happen with the Nazis after World War II. So the Allies defeat them, but just in real life, you have things like Project Paperclip, where you start bringing, the Nazi scientists over, and they start heading up NASA, or like in Winter Soldier, where you start having Hail Hydra, as part of Shield. So
and the rise of the Russians, sort of thing.
Yeah. So we have this kind of stuff. So that would be the background. So this would be basically the high point of the New Republic. So probably Leia would be in charge. If it wasn't her, she would have been in charge at some point and then passed it on to someone else. But she would be all out royalty. It wouldn't be like she's General Leia with a little ragtag of resistance fighters. No, like she is the queen essentially of
Yeah,
the
she's
New
like the
Republic.
chancellor of the New Republic.
Yeah. And so she is married to Han Solo. You know, I hated in Force Awakens how Han Solo became a deadbeat dad and just kind of ran away. No, so Han Solo, he would be, you know, like any of the other great war leaders, you know, someone who led someone through the biggest battles, and now he's like a revered hero of the galaxy. So, you know, he's an elder statesman, but he's still getting his hands dirty. So I always had this scene in mind where he'd be going out into first order space. So there's reports that, you know, the Empire is rebuilding. So he'd be flying in on a Star Destroyer. So he'd be like a Captain Kirk kind of character running a Star Destroyer. He'd have his vest on, but he'd have the trench coat, sort of like the one he'd have on Endor, but it would be all like brown or gray or something like that. And he'd have his kids. So again, the twins, Jason and Jaina. So they'd be hanging out with their dad. He'd be doing like this covert mission going into enemy territory to see what kind of weapons being built. And that would be the crux of the story at this point. This is when they find out, you know, there's dark forces coming back. You'd have Palpatine doing the clone bodies, a lot like Dark Empire. Luke Skywalker, he'd be off on his own journey, sort of like, again, Dark Empire, where he's trying to get a handle on the dark side of the Force. He's tapping into the kind of darker energy. I did like that costume he had in the comic books, where it's very Darth Vader looking, you know, with the big cape and the big collar, and make him a little bit more dark. But he would end up showing up later. So once whatever the conflict is, things start blowing up, getting big, you know, the battles are happening, all hope's lost. That Luke Skywalker comes in, joins up. So then you get the trio back together. You get Leia, Han, Luke, Chewbacca, you know, throw Lando in there. The whole thing, like get the gang back together. But the story would be more about the twins. So like all these guys would become more of a background character, and the twins would be, you know, like the Luke and Leia kind of characters.
Yeah, that's
so and
had them as like they're in the forefront.
Yeah. And that's one thing I didn't like, how Abrams was saying you couldn't introduce Luke Skywalker because he would just steal the show. I don't think that's necessarily true. Like, he is overpowered, but you're telling the story about the two twins. You don't have to make Luke Skywalker the center of attention. Like, he, like, essentially, like we were talking about before, he becomes the wizard character. He's the mentor character.
Yeah.
And he would have his own things I do, like a Gandalf, where it's like, okay, I'm going to help you guys, but now I have to go deal with these other Sith, you know?
Yeah.
I'm going to leave for a little bit because there's something way more dangerous. I'll come
That's
back to you guys later.
I had him at the Jedi Temple, and he's like, I can't go because there's something bigger I sense coming. I have to stay here. And plus, protecting his students.
Yeah, and that would be a very Yoda thing to do as well. Like, Yoda just stayed in hiding for what, 20 years.
And then when the big battle's happening, he suddenly shows up, and suddenly the tide turns the other way. But then at the last minute, tide goes back because he just got his ass killed.
Yeah,
he didn't realize his own nephew would turn on him.
Yeah, I think it would be fun to introduce some of the other characters, like Mara Jade. Like, that would be fun. So when Luke's getting the new group of Jedi together, you could bring in, what's the other, was it? Tentacle Head Girl, Ashoka, or whatever her name is.
Yeah,
I can never say it. It's
Snips. I just remember her nickname.
Yeah, so all these characters, you can bring all of that in, but it would be trying to find like the new cancer that's growing in the galaxy, and that's the return of the Galactic Empire as the First Order.
Yeah.
Oh, and it would still be told through the point of view of R2-D2 and C-3PO.
Oh, I see.
And they wouldn't die. Yeah, so
I killed off
those droids are bulletproof, and they're going to be the last shot of the entire trilogy.
See, I killed them off specifically for the reason of the Empire can't kill them off, but the hero characters can. And in this case, Jason as Darth Caedus can kill R2D2. So when I went into number 8, I put, let's see, reuniting with her father, Han Solo. Jaina tells him of Luke's demise and Jason's turn to the dark side. The Solos take the Millennium Falcon to the Wookiee homeworld of Kashyyyk to join up with Chewbacca, who is with his family. They begin to bring together the remnants of the New Republic forces using Han Solo's influence, as a famous retired Republic hero. They need to end the threat of the First Order. Coming together, they outline the need to destroy the super weapon, stop this clone army, and most importantly, remove Snoke from command of the First Order. Basically, cut off the snake of the head sort of idea. Han and a recently returned Lando target the fleet. Jaina uses the Trade Federation to get a droid army, just fill in the gaps with droids. And Finn begins to trace location of the First Order's real main base. So Han, Chewie, and Lando cobbled together a fleet made up of remnants of the Republic and old smugglers, old friends, sort of thing, kind of like the fleet they did in at the end of the Rise of Skywalker. So they're attacking the fleet that's guarding the First Order's new weapon. Jaina leads a droid assault on Kamino. She destroys the clone facilities, pushing back Darth Caedus' forces. In the pitch battle, Jaina is able to eliminate Snoke, who's revealed to be basically an imperfect clone. That's the big, reveal, like who's the clone of. Finn follows the trail to Exegol, the rumored homeworld of the Sith. There he discovers that Emperor Palpatine, long thought dead with the destruction of the second Death Star, lives and has created a Sith clone army to enslave the entire galaxy. He manages to contact Jaina with the information before he's captured. Then we come to the big set piece, which is Han, Chewie, and Lando's forces attacking the First Order. The battle goes back and forth until finally an injured Han Solo pilots the Millennium Falcon directly into the path of the super weapon and triggers his hyperdrive. Kind of like that scene where it cuts the ship into multiple pieces.
That's Han Solo and the Falcon.
Han Solo and the Falcon. Movie ends right there. So they defeated the super weapon, but at what cost? So kind of like Empire, the movie ends on both an up note, but a very serious down note.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, this one, I didn't get into details on what exactly would be going on. I didn't get this far ahead because at this point we're talking full-on script rewrites. But again, sticking to a lot of the stuff that's in Dark Empire, I do, and this would also be a lot like Empire Strikes Back. So in a way, it would start feeling like a little bit of a carbon copy of that. At this point, the First Order would be like the cancer would be coming into the rest of the Republic. So they'd be trying to take over Coruscant again, if not destroying it. There would be a rise of the Sith. So there would be, what were the knights that they called?
Knights of Ren. Yeah.
Okay, so you'd have something like that kind of a vibe.
They should have all been Sith. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
They should have. They should have had like red lightsabers, the whole deal.
Yeah. Palpatine would be back in full force with a young body at this point. So it's like a fresh young clone body. I like the scene in Dark Empire where they meet up with Lando again. So it's like he's become a businessman again and he's mining by sun. So they have to stay on the dark side of the moon and they can only travel the ships with the sun shields and all that kind of stuff. Like that was just great visuals. I'd love to see that in a Star Wars movie. But the whole thing would have to be like the main heroes are running for their life. So they went into enemy territory. They did their mission in the previous movie. And then everything just starts going to hell. So they'd be escaping with the Falcon. The Star Destroyer would be destroyed. The core team that would have been with them would have to start scattering, a lot like when the rebels had to leave Hoth, that same sort of vibe. And then at the end of the movie, I think there would be Han Solo self-sacrificing to let the kids get free.
Yeah. That was the same thing. Like, he's like, it may have been like the Falcon took a hit. Chewbacca's dead next to him in the cockpit. And he's like, everyone, they're like, they're destroying the forces left and right. And Lando's like, I think this is a lost cause. And you see that the Falcon kind of swing up right into the line with it. It's like, it's never a lost cause. And he's like, hits the thing, and you just do that perfect silence and that cut right through the ship as the ship just kind of falls apart and then just blows up, and taking up most of the fleet with it. That ultimate self-sacrifice to, the mission's not done until it's done.
For me, I'd still have the Falcon. That's another one that'll last throughout the whole movie, unless it gets destroyed in the last one. But I'd need to keep the Falcon around, just like the droids. They got to stick around.
Yeah. And then I went on to episode 9, and episode 9 honestly took me the longest time to because at this point it's a complete rewrite. Like, I'm using nothing from the films at this point, really. So I've put it as: the galaxy, reeling from the loss of the New Republic, is now under the thumb of the New Order, with the command of the Emperor. New Republic forces have returned to guerrilla-style warfare to fight back, with a retired Admiral Akbar as their leader. So he's basically the only one left of the old guard, sort of thing. The last of the Jedi trainees are in disarray with the loss of Luke Skywalker, but his Force Ghost instructs Jaina to redeem her fallen sibling if there's any chance for good to win. So Luke has passed on. He's now a Force Ghost. Lando, having survived the space battle, devises a way to trick Darth Caedus into confronting Jaina alone, as well as starts reaching out to old friends to see what he can do to help. The siblings duel, all the while Jaina trying to convince her twin to return to the light. He bests her, informs her that the Emperor will turn to the dark side of Exegol, which is now the new capital of the First Order, now that Coruscant's basically dust. So they arrive at Exegol. Emperor confidently informs Jaina that the First Order will be exterminating the remnants of the New Republic, and explains that he has foreseen much since the Clone Wars. He says that Anakin Vader, while powerful, would fail him, and that the son of Skywalker would make an inadequate Sith at best. So he used clones since Yoda wounded him at the start of the Empire, and has since taken refuge on Exegol ever since, waiting for the solo son of Skywalker for the Sith to achieve true greatness. And he'll use that phrase, the solo son of Skywalker. Snoke and other clones, including the one that Vader slew, the Death Star, were just ways for him to keep his influence and paving his way for the First Order to dismantle what he considered a flawed empire and a diseased republic. At the end of this monologue, an unknown newcomer will mockingly challenge the Emperor's statement. It's Mace Windu. That's Lando's last contact. He's older, angrier, and attacks the Emperor as Jaina and Jacen resume their duel. Windu defeats the Emperor, remarking he's been in this exact situation before, but without Vader to interfere. The Emperor activates as many clones as he can. Some look like Emperor, some look like Snoke, to try to save himself. So we got a nice big Jedi-Sith battle going on. Jaina is blindsided by several Snoke clones, gravely injured. Darth Caedus kills the clones and holds his sister. Seeing her on the brink of death, shakes the programming of the Emperor, and he returns to the light side. Windu's being forced back by multiple Palpatine clones until Jacen enters the fight. The Jedi duo kill the remaining clones before confronting the Emperor. The Emperor uses one last trick, gravely injuring Windu before Jacen finishes him off once and for all. Then we go to the aftermath. Mace Windu, now missing some limbs and partially crippled, has begun teaching at the Jedi Temple, trying to restore the Jedi to their true glory and pre-Republic days. Jaina has survived and has opted to become a politician like her mother and help lead the New Republic with Lando and Akbar. Jacen leaves to explore the unknown territory, vowing to return if they ever need him. The samurai walking into the sunset. There we go.
Yeah, and this one, again, it would be such a huge rewrite that I don't have the full story, but the idea would be that it would have to come full circle to where it started in the first trilogy. So, again, tying it back to, say, like Nazi Germany. So you have, the rise of the Nazis, defeated by the Allies. They go into hiding and they start popping up in different places like Hydra. The Emperor makes his move. He's got his clones. I like the idea of the multiple clones that he can activate. So you have a Sith army, you have multiple Emperor clones. You have Luke Skywalker, who's been dancing around, like learning the powers of the dark side. You can have, with the one of the twins get corrupted, and that would be a spot for Luke Skywalker to do a self-sacrifice, is to bring whichever twin it is back to the good side, in the same way Darth Vader gave his life. So if Luke was going to die, it would be through something like that. And Luke would have his Jedi army. So this would be the rebirth of the Jedi, going back to the old Republic sort of time. So in the end, the final battle would be the Sith coming out of the shadows in all these planets, using their super weapons, massive assault on the New Republic. But now the Jedis are back. So the New Republic has a Jedi army, and they are able to wipe out the Sith. So it would be somewhere along those lines. And then the last shot would be R2D2 and C3PO. You know, they've made it through the whole thing.
Get rid of those guys. Yeah, it's funny how we have a lot of the similar story. It's just like writing this, the whole time I'm thinking, like, why, what happened with the writing of 789? Like,
yeah,
it's just I was like, it didn't feel that hard to do.
No, it seems like there's a narrative thread that if you just follow the logical conclusion to what happens,
yeah,
and if you pull in a lot of the stuff that's already been created, like,
yeah, like that's why
lots of novels and comics and things that have really great story ideas. Like, why reinvent the wheel?
Like the Thrawn, the whole Thrawn trilogy was.
That's another good point. He would have been a great character to throw in as well. Like, if
I know he's in the Osaka. He's going to be in the Disney Plus one, so that's why I was trying to stay away from that one. But I figured with the way I did this, you could still have the Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett, and it still works fine. You can even have Rogue One; it still works fine. Solo, yeah, you can still do the Han Solo story; it still works okay. But that's why I was like, because in my mind it was like, it just felt like they were trying to like make it the Skywalker trilogy through all 9 movies. And I was like, no, let's do Obi-Wan trilogy, Skywalker trilogy, and then the Solo trilogy to finish it off. And then you have 3 generations. And this way, the Rey character is kind of like Jaina, but actually trained as a Jedi. Still had Finn in there, still had Jason there. Like, Jason's basically kind of like Poe, but with Force powers, but also switches to the dark side. Because I wanted to pull. Go ahead.
One thing I didn't realize, you were talking about how the last trilogy is the Solo trilogy, and I'd never thought of it like that, but essentially it is, because in my version, Leia is not a Skywalker, so the twins legitimately are Solo children. They're not Skywalkers at all. So yeah, even mine would be a Solo trilogy at that point.
And the thing is, I wanted to bring Mace Windu back. Well, the thing is, he's the only Jedi who fought Palpatine and won. Yoda didn't beat him. Windu did. So it would make sense when he got pitched out the window, he didn't die, probably injured, and went underground when Order 66 happened. Lando probably came across him at some point and had him as a contact and was like, all right, shit's going down. I need you to put your lightsaber back together. We really need you. I need you to be a Jedi again. So when he shows up and faces the Emperor, beats him, has him at the tip of the saber, says, I've been here before, but no Vader around to chop my hand off.
Yeah.
So
what age would your Palpatine clones be? Would they be young, or would they?
There'd be a variety of ages.
Okay.
Because the other thing is, I'd have it say that when the primary personality of the Emperor takes on a clone, it immediately starts corrupting. But the younger clones, if he's not directly in control of them, can still stay young. So you would see the Emperor at various stages of his life, like when he was the young senator, all the way up to like the gross hosebag when all the lightning had hit him and shit like that. So plus you have the imperfect clones, which are like the Snokes.
Mm-hmm.
So when
I do like that idea of the clones being just like raw vessels. So it's not until his Force ghost, his spirit, goes into him,
inhabits it. So up until that point, they can follow simple commands and whatnot. But when his personality gets into a specific one, it immediately starts to corrupt because he's just such a pestilence. But like the army, the Sith army that Jason leads, are clones of himself, and they're all dark Jedi. or well, they'd be dark Jedi because they wouldn't be trained in the Sith ways yet, so they'd just be dark. But then like the Snoke assassin, or the Sith assassin that Jaina first fights, is one of Palpatine's clones, trained in the ways of the Sith, just not in direct control by the Emperor, so it hasn't started to corrupt yet. So stuff like that. Because I envision seeing a big, like all these red lightsabers going off. Have you ever seen on YouTube? It's like one of the movie. It's like one of the trailers, and it's the fight between a bunch of Jedi, and it's like one of the assault craft breaks through, and the door drops down, and it's just a bunch of Sith warriors.
Yeah,
that's what I want to see. I don't believe in this. There's only 2 Sith at any one time. No, there could be a whole shitload of them.
Yeah,
there's more than one corrupted kyber crystal out there.
Yep.
So yeah, I wanted to see like a big battle like that. And at the end, by having Mace Windu taking over the Jedi Temple, that's restarting the Jedi. You've got Jaina following in her mother's footsteps, being a politician, and you got Jason following in his uncle's footsteps of being that lone samurai who's there when you need him, but in the rest of the time he's going to be, out of sight, but still doing good. So yeah, that was go ahead.
I think we made some good movies.
I think so too. Far more coherent story than what 7, 8, 9 was.
Yeah.
We didn't have Mary Sue. Because the thing is the problem I have with Rey is if she's an outstanding pilot with no training in the Force, she can dominate others' minds and wield a lightsaber, and it was just like,
yeah, you look at what Luke Skywalker did in the original Star Wars. He held the lightsaber wrong for the most part.
Yeah,
and
he looked down the barrel of it the very first thing. He's like, oh, what's this? Woo.
Yeah, and he fired a photon torpedo or whatever it is. Like, that's it. That's all he did with the Force.
There's a great comic of someone had done. It was like almost like screen grabs, but it was all line art of like, this is your father's weapon, lightsaber, and he looks, and all you see is suddenly the beam at the back of his head. Written by George Lucas. Just credits. It's just like, yeah, okay, yeah. You don't look down the barrel of a weapon.
Yeah. So if you look at the original Star Wars and then use that as the precedent, like anything that rated in that movie, it's just absurd.
Yeah.
Just too many powers. Everything's too easy. Even the fact that she's flying the Falcon better than Han.
Yeah. So that's why I had it as Jaina was basically a Jedi trained under Luke. Mm-hmm. So she knows how to use a lightsaber. She knows how to use the Force.
Yeah. And when you come into it, they would have been trained at a young age, like
you're
supposed to be. So by the time we're introduced to them, probably young teens.
Yeah, I had them
Jedis.
I had them like in their, basically they're 20 or maybe 18, 19. Like, and the things that would even be the holocron that Yoda gave Luke would be, he could even like at some point say that, I've using the teachings of my master Yoda and tapping the holocron and Jedi before him, I've trained you to the best of my ability, sort of thing. So yeah, it's stuff like that to then make it make sense when they pull out a lightsaber and are deflecting bolts and cutting down first order troopers left and right. It's because they've been trained to do that. They know how. It's not like, well, I just instinctively know how. Well, my dad was a clone of Palpatine. That does not wash.
This is one scene that I would want to see, and this would have had to go into, I guess, the Force Awakens movie. So it would be when Han Solo is commanding a Star Destroyer in enemy territory. They have to go out to do this recon mission or whatever. So he stays with the ship, and Jason and Jaina have to go on the mission. So it's like, hey, Dad, can we use the car? And he throws them the keys, and they hop in the Falcon and take off. Something like that would be fun. Just that vibe. It's like, yeah, we need to use the car. It's like, oh, okay, don't hit anything. Bring it back.
I tried to call back a lot of characters, like Bosk and Dengar taking out Jason, stuff like these characters were viewed once or twice in the various things. Bring them back.
Yeah, if they can be used and it makes sense.
Yeah, so
do it.
That's why I brought Mace Windu in at the end. That's why, bringing Lando in, like all, just bring it around full circle, finish it off, so that when you hit the last, the end of the 9th movie, it's all wrapped up. The 3 trilogies, all wrap up nicely.
What happened to me? Because I didn't even really
According
watch
to
those
the
ones.
official,
Did he get his both hands cut off, or just one, or what?
just the one hand cut off and got flung out the window, and they said he was killed.
So it would be cool if he is there with the missing arm still, like no robot hand or anything. So he's all,
Yeah, I mean,
he'd be a really old man missing an arm,
yeah,
almost a
I mean,
cripple.
I'd still get Samuel L. Jackson to play him
Mm-hmm.
and just be very angry. And something
Yeah.
like you know, your boy cut off my hand. I'm going to cut off a lot more off of you. And that's like the whole, like, I've had you in this position before, but there's no Vader around to interfere.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's, because I think that was an underutilized character.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're talking about like Yoda being still trying to, hold the Jedi to that higher ideal. What was the name of the Jedi with the long pink head?
Oh geez, I
I
have
can't
no idea what
can't
all
remember.
those new
I would
characters
have
are called.
him being the unknowingly corrupting influence on the Jedi Council. So he's the one that's like, no, we're not training him. No, we're not doing this, because in his mind, he is the Jedi. So what he wants goes. So when Dooku, renounces his status on the Jedi Council, and as a Jedi, he's not speaking to Yoda, he's speaking to this guy.
Okay, yeah.
So instead of when Order 66, he gets cut down in the field, Order 66 happens, he gets cut down in the Jedi Council chamber by Anakin or a couple of clone troopers, or a combination therein,
Or Boba Fett.
Exactly. That was the other thing. I still had Jango Fett in there. I would have Boba Fett as his natural born teenage son.
Okay.
I mean, they could both be Mandalorians. I'm fine with that. But it just happens that, they want Jango as the template for the clone troopers, and he's got his teenage son with his own set of armor, working with him. And then when Order 66 happens, when, Anakin Vader's walking through the Jedi Temple, you got some clone troopers, and you have Jango on one side and Boba on the other.
Yeah, with me, there'd be no Jango. I'd take him out just to spite everything, just so there's no connection. I'd be fine though if there were Mandalorians. Again, I like the way it was in the Mandalorian, with all of the additional Mandalorian warriors that are in the story. I like that. So I would have something like that. And if you want to make clones out of them like that, that's fine. I don't think they have to be all clones of the same person.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be fine with a whole army of Mandalorians, being cloned, and that's what's the basis of the clone army.
Mm-hmm.
So in essence, it's a Mandalorian army.
Yeah, just maybe less perfect because it's
and not as good as armor.
Process, yeah.
Besker's expensive, damn it.
Yeah, if you can't afford that, it's cheaper to clone a new one.
Clone a new one, throw them in plastic. We're good.
Yep.
Just point them and shoot.
Yeah. So I'm really curious what Troy and Gavin will have to say about this one. So
I am too. I had a lot of fun writing this. I did a fair amount of research through like the Star Wars wiki and stuff like that. But as I said, my main goal was not to make huge drastic changes, so that in theory, if someone were to do this, they could use a lot of the existing footage and just make changes. But yeah, I definitely need like a DeLorean or a TARDIS or something to go make some changes. So yeah, we should find another trilogy and do this again.
Sounds good.
I just don't know if it's going to be as fun as Star Wars. This one was fun. Not. This one was a lot of fun.
Yeah. I like doing these kind of mental exercises.
Yeah, me too.
Since they're not giving us the budget to make the movie ourselves, at least we can come up with some ideas.
Exactly. And this is the kind of stuff we used to do in the Freak Pit all the time. We'd be like, if we're going to do a sequel to this movie, what should it be?
Yeah.
And then a sequel would come up. We're like, man, they really fumbled that one.
That's the danger when you start coming up with good ideas, is then you see what they actually do. It's like, wow.
And you're like, how did that get past that? What 3-year-old did they not have there just to point out that plot hole?
Yeah.
So yeah, and that came up to minute 45 or hour 45, minute 45, an hour and 45. It's not bad.
Yeah, we did all right.
I think so too.
9 movies in less than 2 hours. That's pretty good.
Well, I mean, we each did 9 movies, so 18 movies in less than 2 hours, and less than the running time of any of the movies.
Yeah.
It's not
And
bad
to
at
anyone
all.
else that's listening to this, chime in. Let us know what you think. And if you have any ideas that are better than ours, let us know.
I'd love to hear them. Honestly, I would. I love working in a collaborative sort of environment. If you've got an idea that you think is better than mine, by all means, share it. Probably is. So, yeah.
Right. Ready to close this one out?
Yeah. So I think with that, we're done with the Star Wars. Is it enology? Is that the term for 9 films? Enealogy? I can't remember. I used to know it. Anyways, so the 3 trilogies of Star Wars has been rewritten by us. Stay tuned as we do other ones. And we hopefully will at some point soon do the end of Peacemaker and Book of Boba Fett, because 2 endings. All right. So good night, everybody.
Good night, folks.